Hi, thank you for being here today. I am Acosta and I'm preparing a manuscript for publication on interval training for aerobic conditioning for MMA athletes. This manuscript will be split into 4 parts: the introduction, aerobic and anaerobic training, conditioning alternatives, and examples of suggested workouts. The first part, the introduction, will include history of MMA fight analysis, and a needs analysis for an MMA athlete. So what is MMA? MMA is a compilation of several combative sports like boxing, Muay Thai, wrestling, and judo, to name a few. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu started in the 1980s and is considered a mixed martial arts sport. In 1993, the Ultimate Fighting Championship came about and the sport of MMA grew largely and quickly in the States. Mixed martial arts is a combative sport where athletes utilize 3 general tactics. First being striking, like punching and kicking. Second being finishing holds, like joint locks and choke holds. And lastly, maintaining or gaining control of their opponent. When looking at the breakdown of an MMA fight, an amateur fight can last up to 9 minutes, consisting of 3 3-minute rounds with a 1-minute rest in between each round. A professional fight is 3 5-minute rounds with a 1-minute rest in between each round, and a professional championship and some non-championship fights are 5 5-minute rounds with a 1-minute rest in between each round. That can equal anywhere between 15 to 25 minutes of total work. Throughout these rounds, the fighters perform 6 to 14 seconds of a high-intensity power and strength movement, followed by 15 to 36 seconds of lower intensity movements like circling, holding, and walking. Some needs of a combat athlete are strength and power to be able to punch and kick hard enough and maintain control. Conditioning to be able to last to the end of the fight without losing strength. Weight management to be able to gain or cut body weight to move to different weight classes without hindering performance. And finally, technique. An MMA athlete needs technique training in different martial arts to be able to perform and defend joint locks, choke holds, and striking. Part 2 on aerobic and anaerobic training will consist of topics like aerobic training effects, anaerobic training effects, and energy systems. So looking into aerobic training effects, the question, does training aerobically affect strength performance and development, will be discussed through literature review. A study exploring concurrent training designed by Hickson showed that 7 weeks into a 10-week study, the endurance training program involving cycling as the aerobic activity interfered with lower body strength and strength development. A 21-week study done by Hakkinen found that out of the 2 examined groups, the combined strength and endurance group did not achieve same improvements as the strength-only group in the ability to rapidly produce force. There was an interference in explosive strength development, even though the programming for endurance training was minimal. Having knowledge on this type of potential outcome can help coaches decide how important strength is for their athlete, as well as the importance of endurance. Strength and endurance can change priorities based on the athlete's needs as well as their opponent's strengths. Hip, trunk, and shoulder strength and power is very important in the sport of MMA in order to have stronger strikes and be more dominant on the ground and to better defend oneself when grappling. Therefore, a decrease in strength could be detrimental to the athlete's performance during a fight, since strength plays an important role in the sport of MMA. Several different studies on concurrent training by D'Souza, Sporenwenger, Bell, Hickson, Kramer, McCusker, and LaBounty have all reported decreases in strength performance and development when athletes are training aerobically. It's important to know this about concurrent training because in the sport of MMA, while athletes can't afford to have a decrease in strength, they also need to have some level of aerobic endurance to be able to successfully last all 3 or 5 rounds in a fight. Now we'll review some literature on anaerobic training affects aerobic endurance performance. In a review done by Anning, it was reported that resistance training program involving maximal strength and explosive strength resulted in improvements in movement economy, endurance, specific muscle power testing, and short and long-term endurance performance. Giovanelli found that in a 12-week strength, explosive, and plyometric training program, the movement economy in ultramarathon runners was improved at submaximal speeds. This means that ultramarathon runners were able to move at a submaximal speed while expending less energy than before. Agard found that well-trained cyclists improved their 45-minute time trial with the addition of strength training and saw no change in the muscle fiber area and capillarization. Aerobic capacity, endurance performance, and capillarization can be enhanced through the implementation of strength training, mainly due to the improved exercise economy and delay of onset fatigue. Now looking at a study done by Tota on anaerobic training effects on combat athletes, we see the effects of a training program on upper limb power and aerobic performance. The program resulted in favorable changes for the MMA middleweight fighter, such as improved body composition, improved peak power in the upper limbs, improved aerobic power, and improved lactate clearance. So moving on to energy systems, this chart is based off of the NSCA's Essentials of Strength and Conditioning, but it's adapted to show MMA-specific examples. The extremely high-intensity movements like punching, kicking, and throws are examples of the phosphagen system. Chokeholds, takedowns, and striking combinations are examples of the phosphagen and fast glycolysis system, since these movements are still very high intensity, but they last a little longer. Maintaining and resisting control are examples of fast glycolysis. Circling in the ring is an example of a moderate to low intensity movement and can be classified as fast glycolysis and the oxidative energy system. According to Amtman, Labonte, an MMA fighter must have high aerobic as well as anaerobic potential. The third part of the manuscript is conditioning alternatives. In this section, we will review interval style training and its effects on the body. So what is interval training? It's a period of high intensity work such as weighted sled pulls, prowler pushes, sprints, or battle ropes, followed by a period of rest or low intensity movements like shadow boxing, stretching, or an easy bodyweight movement which can be performed for multiple rounds. This training design is very similar to the structure of what naturally happens throughout a typical MMA fight. What are some of the effects that interval training has on the body? Farzad examined trained wrestlers for 4 weeks and found that short sprint intervals and short rests can improve both aerobic and anaerobic performance, VO2 max, and lactate threshold. Based off of 2 separate studies, one by McKeska and one by Wilmore, it was found that by repeating bouts of high-intensity, near-maximal exercise with periods of active rest for up to 2 minutes, the anaerobic system can be stimulated while maintaining aerobic power. High-intensity interval training has shown to improve VO2 peak, muscle buffering capacity, and aerobic capacity. After 6 weeks of a high-intensity interval training program, Herbert found that there was an increase in muscle power output in the master's athletes he was looking at. So not only has interval training shown improvements in performance, but it has also been shown to help with weight management. Telanen found an increase in whole body fat oxidation after 2 weeks with a total of 7 training sessions performed on a stationary bike. Other studies have found an increase in whole body fat oxidation over the period of 4 to 6 weeks utilizing the high intensity training methods. So part 4 of the manuscript will be examples of suggested workouts, which will include different ways to organize and create interval workouts, as well as samples of what different kinds of interval workouts can look like. So on to the first example of an interval style workout that can be utilized is doing 15 rounds of alternating a 1-minute sled push at 50% of the 1 rep max of the athlete's squat, followed by 30 seconds of active rest like walking, jogging, or shadow boxing. This workout lasts 22.5 minutes, which is close to the total potential length of the title fight, which is 25 minutes. The second example also involves alternating 2 exercises. The first exercise is a 1-minute sprint with a weight vest on that's 25% of the athlete's body weight, followed by a minute of shadow boxing with the vest on as well. This can be up to the coach whether or not the athlete shadow boxes with or without weights, like holding dumbbells in the hand. The total length of time for this workout is 25 minutes and it involves the whole body. The third example is a different type of style of interval training. A timer is set for 25 minutes and the athlete performs exercises 1A through 1D for as many rounds as possible in the 25 minutes. In this sample workout, the athlete will perform a seated rope sled pull for 30 yards, followed by a 30-yard sled push, then finishing up with a 30-yard bear crawl back to the starting point. The last part in this is optional active rest, which can be taken after the bear crawl as needed, so that will be up to 30 seconds of rest. The final example is breaking up the workout into two parts. This can be a split as an upper and lower, a push and pull, a cardio and lifting, or in this example, a resisted and non-resisted cardiovascular movement. The first part in this workout is a 50-yard resisted sprint, followed by a 50-yard resisted walk, with an optional of 0 to 30 seconds of active rest. The second part is the same as the first part, but involves no resistance. So the beauty of interval training and all of these examples is how specific you can gear these workouts to the athlete's needs. If the athlete needs more strength training, then strength and power-based movements can be the higher intensity portion of the interval. If the athlete needs more conditioning, then the workouts can be organized more like example 2 with the weight vest sprint and shadow boxing. Another great thing about these intervals is that the sessions are over fairly quickly, which allows the athlete more time to recover, work on more technique training, or put in more work on any other weaknesses they may have. The objective of this presentation is to address the topic of high intensity interval as preferred method of conditioning for MMA athletes to utilize as a part of their fight training. As shown in previous slides, interval training can improve anaerobic and aerobic capacity, lactate threshold, whole body fat oxidation, and it can be individualized to the athlete's needs. The goal for the manuscript is for it to be used as a tool for current and future coaches as suggestions on conditioning alternatives for a mixed martial arts athlete. Thank you, and here are my references.